This is probably gonna go up long after Halloween is over, but that's okay. I don't care. Do you care? Hello friends, Halloween week is upon us finally, and I have some spooky reads planned for this week that I'm really excited about. I'm gonna be taking you along on some walks through our local cemetery, which is always really gorgeous this time of year, and there's actually quite a lot of, it's in the middle of the city, but there's a lot of wildlife that lives in our local cemetery. So we have some plans to go to a nearby forest preserve, which is always really stunningly beautiful this time of year, and go on some hikes, go on the path that leads from one parking lot to the other through some really, really pretty woods. And we'll have Halloween, so that's pretty exciting. It's gonna be fun. And again, I'm gonna be reading some spooky books and keeping you posted on how they go. I think they're gonna go really well. So my son's birthday's coming up, and he loves anything spooky. And I have this quilt that I started probably maybe 10 years ago. My mom and I took a class. It was the first quilt I had done since high school. But I got through piecing it all together, quilting it, and even had started attaching the binding. But at that point, I was still so new to quilting. The binding piece was beyond my expertise, and so I abandoned it for like a decade. I found it in my closet recently and decided to pick it back up. And so I was like, wow, I'm actually almost done with this. So what you have is this. You have a quilt sandwich. You have the backing, and you have the front, and you have the batting in the middle. And the binding is what you attach to the front and the back and curl it over so that it keeps everything nice and tidy and inside the quilt. And I had abandoned this poor quilt at the very last stage. So what I'm trying to do really quickly before my son's birthday is finish the binding and hand stitch it on, and then wash it and give it to him for his birthday. I thought I could talk to you about what I've been reading, what spooky things I've been reading while I'm stitching up the binding on this quilt. I had to remove the binding because I had done such a bad job attaching it to the front of the quilt when I was still a newbie. Just put a little knot in it. 1, 2, 3. This is a horrible idea for a video. So I have been reading Creatures of Passage by Maroya Yejide, and this is from Akashic Books. This is the perfect read for this time of year. It is so atmospheric and wonderful. So it's about this character named Nephthys. I don't know if it's Nephthys or Nephthys. She lives in Washington, D.C. It takes place in the 1970s, and she drives basically like a cab. It's what kind of car is it? A 1967 Plymouth Belvedere with a ghost in the trunk. Nephthys drives this car around, and basically she is kind of called or summoned kind of in a supernatural way to anybody who is in need of a ride, desperately in need of a ride. For whatever reason, a traditional cab just won't do. Maybe it's, the time of day or where they're going or whatever it is. And she has some regular passengers who take the cab frequently. There's one woman whose son is in a mental hospital. She regularly goes to visit him. And so Nephthys regularly goes to pick up this woman to drive her to the hospital to visit her son. And she just gets these sudden realizations of who she needs to go pick up and where they're going to be going to. And Nephthys has a twin brother who died. He was found in a river, and I think it was after his death that she ended up basically finding this Plymouth and realizing that it gets surrounded by this fog, and the fog helps lead her to the person who needs the ride. There's kind of this supernatural element. An additional supernatural element to the cab is that it's never stopped by the police. No matter what, she never gets pulled over or stopped by the police. And it has a ghost of a white girl in the trunk who kind of chimes in with thumps and bumps and noises based on, the conversation going on in the car. The ghost in the trunk kind of can read Nephthys's mood and knows when she needs to, stay quiet and let Nephthys kind of have her thoughts to herself. Anyway, Nephthys also has a nephew named Dash. It's like a great nephew who comes to, and the story starts out with Dash coming to visit Nephthys one day. And Dash's mother, her name is Amber, and Amber is the daughter of Nephthys's deceased brother. Amber also has some supernatural abilities. She has these dreams that kind of foretells deaths of people in the neighborhood or in the city, and she kind of shares them with this newspaper. So they call it the lottery. They publish the lottery I think it's every week, and it's Amber's dreams. She'll give like a situation where like a man named Wilson clutches his arm and loses his heart is one of them. So it's just filled with really dark, difficult themes of abuse and death. It's really dark, but it's really wonderful, really beautifully written, and the characters are absolutely fantastic, and it's super atmospheric and inventive. Like, this car is incredible. And then the house that Amber lives in it's basically described as being underwater. Like, when you go in, you feel like you're underwater, and movements are really slow and everything's kind of murky, and she lives at the bottom of this hill. It's kind of like a valley, and so it's always like shrouded in this fog, and it's the only house down at the bottom, like in this dip in the land. It's the only house down there. And one of the many interesting things about Creatures of Passage is the way the author deals with time within the narrative, and it's really fitting because, of course, the form matches the plot or the theme. So much of it is about, being creatures of passage, where, it's about the time we spend in these particular places, and we move through different places in life and death, how time relates to space and to people and spirits within people. And so the narrative itself plays with that theme of time. You'll get like a description of a character, and usually it's like when you're introduced to a character, you'll get like a full paragraph about that character's great grandmother or something, and you'll say, little did such and such character know that their great grandmother was X, Y, and Z, or did X, Y, and Z. Or it'll jump to the future and we'll say, little did, such and such character know that this would happen, this, great related world event would happen in the future. And so there are these jumps, so these characters in the moment in time that they're in the narrative are completely unaware, as they're passing through time, they are unaware of what has happened before or will happen in the future once their spirits are no longer inhabiting their bodies. But, we as the reader can be aware of those elements of their past and future, or of the world's past and future. Just a really wonderful way of illustrating this theme of creatures of passage, and how we're all just passing through, and there are plenty before us and after us who will also be passing through. Those previous creatures of passage or future creatures of passage, inhabit us in certain ways, but we have no conscious knowledge of what they did or who they were or what their obsessions or loves were or how they impacted the world. That's not part of our consciousness, but it's still a part of us, and it's still a part of the overall story. And I gotta rethread my thread. I kind of want to do a video on different novels and their treatment of time, and how time can be handled in various ways within fiction or nonfiction or poetry, but in particular fiction. And what it means for the story, what it means for the themes. And this would be a perfect book for that kind of a video. I mostly read at night before bed, but when a book is like really intense, like if it has really like dark themes that'll kind of mess with my mind, I have trouble. I need like a second book to read after it, or I need to like just find time during the day to read it. And there are some, the primary conflict in the book revolves around child abuse and sexual abuse. And so that kind of stuff, really, it's hard to read at night right before you go to bed, because then your mind just is like, I don't know, it disturbs my sleep, as it should. I mean, it should disturb me. Yeah, so I just kind of need to find a different time of day to read it, or have another book to read after it. To calm myself down after Creatures of Passage is none other than Dracula by Bram Stoker. This is a book that I'm reading with my husband right now. So we both have a copy and are reading it. And, obviously it is also very dark, but the language is such that it doesn't quite disturb me quite as much as certain parts of Creatures of Passage. Maybe it's just, being a parent, it's hard to read about. Certainly the parts of Dracula that did keep me up, or did, shake me a little bit, were the parts that do mention kids being, bitten. I don't know. Is it a parent thing, or does everybody have trouble with that? How far? Maybe like a little more than halfway through Dracula. I love it. My husband is enjoying it, but struggling a little more with some of the slower parts. I'm way ahead of. We tried to keep pace with each other for a little bit there, but I am way ahead of him now. And at one point I was like, what part are you on? And he's like, Lucy has finally been bitten. And then there were a bunch of other words on the page. He's enjoying it, but it's definitely, there's some slow parts. Up next, as soon as I finish Creatures of Passage, which I'm almost done, my plan is to pick up both Ghosts by Edith Wharton, which was published by, this edition of it is published by New York Review of Books. And then the other book on my nightstand right now is Ghost Town, I think Kevin Chen, if I'm remembering the author correctly, from Europa Editions, is a Taiwanese author, and it's translated from, I believe it said it was translated from both the Mandarin and the Taiwanese. I started reading a couple pages of that actually when I needed something to calm me down after a particularly difficult moment in Creatures of Passage. And I found it a little bit hard to follow. I don't know if it's because it was late at night or whatever. Late at night, I go to bed at 8. So late at night. I get into bed at 8, and then I read, and then I try to fall asleep by 9. So late at night, when I was reading my scary books, let's see, how far have I gotten? So that's how long it takes me to get through that much of the binding. It's kind of a slow process, but it's so relaxing. So see how this is now stitched. Sew it on, and then sew it on like this. Does anyone care? You sew it on like this, and you just flip it over and then sew it to the back. Happy Halloween, everybody. It is a beautiful, foggy, gloomy day in Chicago, but not too cold. It's actually perfect weather for Halloween. I think we're gonna make one of my favorite new fall time treats. I discovered pumpkin tortilla chips at Trader Joe's. Also, they have this delicious pumpkin seed salsa as well. And we got a spaghetti squash in our farm box, our CSA box. And so I had this like light bulb moment of doing spaghetti squash nachos. We take the spaghetti squash and roast it, and then take a fork and get the spaghetti squash out and kind of put it back in the oven and roast it some more, and then use it as a topping on nachos, almost if it was like cheese. And then you can add like beans or pickled onions or green onions, and a bunch of like different fall flavored salsas, and it's really, really delicious. So I think we're gonna have our special fall time nachos for dinner. And trick-or-treating in our neighborhood is amazing. We live on a block where there's a lot of apartment buildings and condos, but very close by is a neighborhood with a lot of single family homes, and they go all out, and people come out like on their sidewalks to do trick-or-treating. So they come like right to the sidewalk with their bowls of candy, so you can just walk by and do your trick-or-treating and not even have to go up to the door. They make it very easy. And like people come in from all over to go trick-or-treating in this particular neighborhood, and they decorate like crazy. The other day was a beautiful day, so I went on my back porch and finished reading Creatures of Passage, and it was amazing all the way to the very end. I already talked a lot about it previously while I was doing my binding on my quilt, which I did finish, by the way. So I won't go into it here, but it was really wonderful. Again, that's from Akashic Press. And so that was a really, really wonderful book to finish up right before Halloween. So right now I am reading Ghosts, a collection of short stories by Edith Wharton, and she collected these herself from amongst her stories that contained some sort of ghostly presence. And this edition is published by New York Review of Books. It's really wonderful so far. It's very atmospheric, perfect for this time of year. I'm going to be reading it a little bit after Halloween too, but it's perfect. A lot of these they feature kind of the structure where it's not the person who experienced the ghost themselves who's telling the story. It's somebody else relating a story they heard from someone. And I feel like that's, that's a common structure for a story in general, but especially with ghost stories, it seems like that's such a common structure, is like, I heard this ghost story from someone else. They told me about this crazy thing that happened to them, and here I'm telling it to you now. Kind of the tradition of the ghost story being told to you by somebody who may or may not have experienced it themselves. Maybe it has something to do with like the credibility of the story, where the person doesn't need to be questioned heavily, or they can't be questioned heavily about whether it actually happened or not. They can say, well, this is what I've heard. I'm just telling you what I know. And so it adds a little bit of distance to the story, so you can hear it and not worry too much about having to question the truth of it or not, because the person telling it to you is just telling you what they know. And so you can kind of suspend disbelief a little bit more easily, maybe. So that's actually the structure for a bunch of these stories. My favorite so far, well, the two of my favorites, The Eyes. And so it's this older man who is kind of got this group of protege young men who come over for a night of drinking and talking, and they're each asked to share a ghost story. So they all share a ghost story, and then at the very end, the host is asked, like, well, what about your ghost story? Tell us, you must have a ghost story too. And so he talks about that when he was a younger man, he was haunted by a pair of eyes that kept appearing at certain and very particular and specific moments in his life. So it's the story of these haunting, terrifying eyes that would appear at the foot of his bed in the middle of the night, and then he'd turn on the light and there would be nothing there. And so then you get the full story of how that evolved and how he tried to kind of escape the eyes, and like what happened in his life as he was basically trying to escape this pair of eyes that were staring him down in the middle of the night. Also a story called Afterward is about a couple, an American couple. They moved to England and they want to live in this house that is old and in the middle of nowhere and doesn't have all the modern amenities, because they want to have that like pure countryside life, I guess. They're asking a friend or a cousin before they buy the house, does the house have a ghost? Because all houses like this, we must have a ghost in this This house is kind of part of the deal for moving into a remote old estate. And I think it's their cousin, says, well, yes, there are stories that this house that you want to buy does have a ghost, but everyone who encounters the ghost doesn't realize that they encountered the ghost until a long time afterwards. So when you see the ghost, you don't know that you're seeing a ghost until a very long time afterwards. So that's the title of the story, is Afterward. Like, it's not until later, until something has happened, that you realize, like, the interaction you had actually was with a ghost, or that you had seen a ghost. So then, of course, they buy the house and move there anyway, and the story goes on from there. I'm really loving this collection. I can't wait to dive into it more tonight after trick-or-treating. Hopefully I'll get some time to. Highly recommend checking this out. Again, New York Review of Books has wonderful, wonderful books. Halloween is long, long over. It's been almost a week since Halloween. We're just finally recuperating from all the festivities, only to all come down with a decently bad cold. I finally finished Ghosts by Edith Wharton, which is the collection of short stories that she actually put together at the end of her life. She put together all her ghostly stories, and I think they were published between 1902 and 1937. Oh, hi. Okay. I've sent my son off. It's Sunday, and I've sent him off to keep him occupied. Have asked him to collect all of the Halloween themed books that we have in our house. And so that's his big project while I'm trying to film this video. I have to admit, I haven't read any of Edith Wharton's novels, which is hard to believe, but it's kind of fun that I started off with her ghost stories, with her short stories. Oh, hello. Do we have a guest? I think I've been talking about ghost books here. Have I accidentally summoned a ghost? Oh, wow. Some ghostly books. Oh.
You want music?
You're going to play some ghostly music?
I'll play some music.
Okay. I don't think these are all the Halloween books in our house that you've gathered. I think you need to go look for more.
This is enough.
It's enough?
Daddy said it's enough.
But, okay. So we have the Haunted Library. There's ghostly music coming from within you. Awesome, friendly, spooky stories from the Book Loft in Columbus, Ohio. The Gruffalo is a Halloween book. Spooky House, a favorite. Ooh, Where's My Mummy? And the Scooby-Doo Encyclopedia. Ooh. I don't think those are nearly all the books. Okay. I need you to go keep searching. I guess this will be a quick update. Some of the endings are a little funny. There's more than one story that end on an ellipses, ... They all feature, almost all of them, if not all of them, feature a really fantastic, spooky house. Most of them are like old estates, big, spooky old houses. But every single one has some sort of setting or that like the setting is part of the character, partly as a character within the story, and they're all very spooky and play a central role in the spooky happenings. There's one where, you know, there's a ghost that ends up maybe not being a ghost. There are ghosts who communicate via letters, and there are kind of ghosts that aren't necessarily ghosts, but maybe are like the spirit of a living person who has some ill intention against another character. Their kind of evil side of them appears kind of as a ghostly presence. There's a lot of variety. One thing that I do wish New York Review of Books did is actually show the publication date or the original publication date of the stories. They're definitely not in order, and it would be really nice to be able to see kind of what was published when. Okay, I'm going to talk about one more book.
Okay, I'll be making the spooky music.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have to make the spooky music?
Exact music.
I'm going to start talking about my book. Okay. So I had also started reading Ghost Town by Kevin Chen, and again, this is from Europa Editions, and this was the winner of the Taiwan Literature Award. It was originally published, it just came out in English, the English translation, but it was originally published in 2019. This was translated from Mandarin and from Taiwanese, and I mentioned that in my last update. I am just now educating myself on the languages spoken in Taiwan, and so now it's, you know, my understanding that Mandarin is on paper is recorded as the official language of Taiwan, but also the majority of the population speaks Taiwanese. And I don't know how much of the book was written in which language. It's kind of hard to tell from reading the English, but I'm going to look into that some more because it's really interesting to me. I am loving it so far. I'm only a little. I just started it, but it's promoted as being like mostly from the voice of a character named Keith Chen, who is the son of a family who has 5 daughters, and I originally thought it had one son, that he was the first son, but actually no, that's wrong. He is the second son. So 5 girls, 2 boys, and he moves to Berlin, and we've learned early in the novel that he has been imprisoned in Germany for murdering his boyfriend. But the novel opens with him coming back to Taiwan during the Ghost Festival. The Ghost Festival is a month-long time when ghosts are returning to the world, kind of the gates of hell kind of open, and the ghosts can be among the living. And so he's returning to his town right during the Ghost Festival, and it's a time when a lot of offerings are given to ghosts and ancestors, and symbolic paper money is burned. And so I'm going to link to a video that talks a little bit more about the Ghost Festival and how it's celebrated below, because it's something that I'm learning more about as I read this. But what I'm finding from the very beginning of the book is seems to be so far as much told from the perspectives of Keith's sisters as it is from Keith. And then also we have some voices of some dead relatives and dead ancestors who are sharing kind of their pieces of their story. I don't know if that's going to continue, and if it's not, even though it was kind of billed as mostly Keith's perspective and Keith's story, if it indeed will continue to be a chorus of voices, including his sisters. I really hope it does, because I actually am adoring the perspectives from his sisters. It is... I'm really glad. This was really great to have read just after finishing Creatures of Passage, because it has that similar, what would you call it? Because it has that similar crossover between the world of the dead and the world of the living, and you hear voices of the dead and voices of the living in both novels. So it's really cool to have them kind of paired up next to each other, to see how both authors deal with adding that to their narrative. Hope I wrap that book up. I'm having trouble following. So I think that's gonna do it for our Halloween update. I think we're at our limit here for this vlog.
I'm trying to make it as loud as I can.
Great.